For my garbage person of the week, I have got someone who has occasionally ended up in the can, Tucker, with that look. They told him to do a different face. Turns out he can't. So, that's Tucker Carlson, but why? Why back in the garbage, Tucker? Well, after trout fishing for 4 days, following his head writer being fired for turning out to be a vicious racist, he came back, and on Monday, Tucker Carlson railed against the New York Times on his primetime show, claiming that a freelance writer and photographer, who he named, I will not, so as to not contribute to what I'm going to describe to you, but he named them specifically, were trying to, quote, injure my wife and kids so that I will shut up and stop disagreeing with them. Carlson said the paper was planning to publish the location of his home and didn't know why they were writing a story on him. So he goes on to say, editors there know exactly what will happen to my family when it does run. I called them today and I told them they didn't care. They hate my politics. They want this show off the air. If one of my children gets hurt because of a story they wrote, they won't consider it collateral damage. They know it's the whole point of the exercise, to inflict pain on my family, to terrorize us, to control what we say. So he's saying New York Times is going to publish a story that will have my literal address so that my kids will be murdered, and that's what the New York Times wants. Now, they responded to this by saying the New York Times does not plan to publish Tucker Carlson's residence, which Carlson was aware of before his broadcast tonight, because as he alluded to, he had a conversation with them, and they told him, we're of course not going to publish your actual address, you lunatic, but that didn't stop him from going on the air and talking about it. And what happened after Tucker Carlson did this whole story about a story that was supposedly going to be published that was never going to be published? Well, the right spent a couple of days applauding him for his courage in calling it out and attacking the New York Times for a story that hadn't been published and they say was not ever going to be published. They were attacked for days, but not just the New York Times. Turns out it gets more specific than that, because in an interview with the Eric Wemple blog, one of the two that was named by Tucker Carlson alleged that about an hour after the Carlson accusations, someone attempted to break into his main home while he and his wife were present. Quote, it was like a booming sound, someone trying to get in. Our doors up until that segment had actually been unlocked. When the segment aired, everything got locked, and I'm glad it did, because within an hour, somebody was here. We sort of put ourselves in the safest place we could, away from the windows, and called police and waited it out. The other, again not showing the full name, said he had received thousands of emails stemming from Carlson's Monday night monologue, most of which were some mix of abusive, threatening, and hateful. Family members, he said, had received direct threats as well. Though no one had shown up at his doorstep, he notified local police about the harassment. Among those who were harassed, said one of the sources, were Times reporters who weren't even involved in the story. Other victims include people with similar names, such as those who had the misfortune of showing up in database searches. According to a Times source, some of the people on the receiving end contacted police, bewildered and unclear as to why they were being targeted. But they were being targeted because Tucker Carlson, in a story ostensibly about how unfair it would be for him to be targeted by the media, put out their names, and they were targeted because immediately, as the segment was going on, his rabid followers started searching for the addresses of the people he named. And they got those addresses, and they also got other people, and they began trying to break into their homes, sending death threats, sending them to reporters that weren't even involved in the story that literally never ran and wouldn't have ever contained what he asserted it did. So in an attempt to protect himself, he got those people harassed. And now they worry about the possibility of them being killed.
So I disagree with one thing you said.
What's
in that it was a attempt to protect himself.
Yeah, you know, it's an attempt to distract from the racist writer and the fact that he... Well, really fast, just to be clear, from both the racist writer, but also the sexual harassment allegations that awaited him when he returned from his trout fishing story. That is why his first story was about how he was the big victim. And he made up this entire thing. But sorry, continue.
And implied in all of that is his explicit attempt to do the thing that he's implying that the New York Times would maybe have eventually done.
Exactly.
Which is to dock somebody and send folks to their house.
Yeah. Now, he didn't explicitly do it, but he named them very specifically. Appearing to know, since you would have to in a segment about how important it is to hide people's identity when there is a mob that could potentially come for them, he named them. Again, they were never going to list his address. He had been told as much before he went on the air, but he is willing, in the same way that he said the New York Times is going to, he's willing to risk them being threatened and potentially hurt if that gets the heat off of him a little bit over the sexual harassment and the racist writer. That is absolute garbage.
The most hilarious. This is a very serious and terrible story. The most hilarious thing is that anyone needs any information about what Tucker Carlson's house looks like. Close your eyes. You know exactly where he lives and what it's like. Period. He is a Swanson broth heir. He and all his Tucker Swanson broths are rabid nonsense people. Tucker lives in a castle on a cloud and has since the day he was born.
Yeah.
And has never and Tucker has only faced one kind of adversity in his entire life. I'm sure people he's known have died, so have mine, so toe to toe butthole. But Tucker Carlson's adversity is getting called out by Jon Stewart.
Yep.
For being on Crossfire, which sent him into a temporary tailspin of not having cameras pointed at him.
Yep.
And rather than learn the lesson of not just creating BS arguments for arguments and PR's sake, he instead was like, well, I'm just going to play only to my base.
Yep.
And I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep cameras pointed at me forever. And in doing so, even though it's not as explicit as he did on the show the other day, calling out a New York Times writer, he has called out all sorts of kinds of people and made their experience in this country way less safe.
Yeah.
Has endangered their lives by spewing his racist vitriol, hate, and strategy for how to execute that and make it a reality.
Yep.
Nonstop. Every night.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And so since his return, and you're 100% right, it's been white identity politics. That's it. That's it. And accusing people of doing the things that he's literally trying to do as he's doing the accusing. Absolute garbage. But those are not the only two garbage people. We also have...
I just want to say, like, his big victim moment is not getting doxxed.
Yeah.
Not getting doxxed was him being victimized.
Yeah, that was him saying they're going to dox me when they weren't going to dox him, and he was sort of doxing someone at that time, is the Dave Rubin don't burn my book, when the only point of the entire thing is that he's desperate for literally anyone to burn his book. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.